achieved.
Now, obviously, I'm breaking down UFC 225 with this episode of my prediction show, and one of the fights on this card, has been well publicized, is the welterweight bout between CM Punk, Phil Brooks, former WWE champion, 0-1 MMA fighter, and Mike Jackson, also an 0-1 MMA fighter. And again, I understand why CM Punk's getting the push here, getting the opportunity. He's fighting at home in Chicago. He has a lot of notoriety. People want to see him fight and see what happens. And I give him all the credit in the world for attempting this. And, you know, he can't do anything with what the situation he's been handed. What I do is I question Dana White and the UFC's decision-making to put him on the main card of a pay-per-view. I would have no problem if they put him on the Fox televised version, televised portion of the card. But the fact that a fight between Alistair Overeem and Curtis Blaydes is on the prelims, or Claudia Gadelha and Carla Esparza, or friggin' Ricardo Lamas against Mirsad Bektic, that's unreal. The fact that Joseph Benavidez and Sergio Pettis, a flyweight bout, and I believe someone said there's been not a single UFC men's flyweight bout on a pay-per-view main card yet. In fact, it's on the Fight Pass portion of the event. It's disrespectful. You know, he's talking with Yair Rodriguez, who just got actually recently brought back to the promotion. Rodriguez was let go, a young talent fighter, for turning down a couple of fights, which I get. But if the UFC is going to say, take the fights we give you and be a legitimate professional and do your job, they need to do their job here. CM Punk versus Mike Jackson with a combined record of 0-2 should be on the prelims. They should say, we want to see this guy do well. It'll bring huge numbers to the prelims. You know, people will tune in to watch this. I really don't think CM Punk versus Mike Jackson is doing that much for the pay-per-view. It might help add a few more buys, but honestly, with Whittaker, Romero, Covington, and RDA, Holm versus Anderson, Tuivasa, Arlovski, and you throw any one of those other fights I mentioned, that is one of the best pay-per-views we've seen in a long time. So you put that on there, and you are looking at a very, very strong pay-per-view opportunity. I think CM Punk and Jackson should be in the prelims. I think the UFC needs to avoid these freak show type fights. I think Bellator has trended that way a little bit with some of these odd fights that we're seeing. I just don't like it from a professional organization, from a legitimacy standpoint. Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson, and on this episode of the show, we are breaking down the upcoming UFC 225 event, which will emanate from Chicago, Illinois, the United Center on June 9th, featuring 5 main card fights, including Rafael dos Anjos and Colby Covington for the interim welterweight title, and Robert Whittaker defending his middleweight title against Yoel Romero in a rematch from a very, very good fight not that long ago. I'll be giving you my 5 main card predictions on this episode of the show. All 8 of my preliminary breakdowns will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net, so make sure you check those out. I'm coming off a not too bad event at UFC Fight Night 131. I went 8-4. I had a couple losses that really hurt, but still the bet packs return money. The big bankroll bet packs return 46.02 units, and again, those are for guys who want to grind out and win. The big risk, 62.58. Now, the thing that cut both of those down was the fact that Jessica Aguilar's fight was canceled. Obviously, had she lost, then we don't win any of the diminished totals. Had she won, both those numbers would have been through the roof. With Ellenberger losing and with Jimmy Rivera losing, that hurt as well. But hey, that's the way it goes. We're looking to keep things going. We've had a fantastic 2018. Again, the bet packs are cheap, $15. I talk about every single fight. I talk about props. I talk about fantasy betting. I talk about everything you could think of to give you the opportunity to say, okay, I like this, or this is what I was thinking, and it corresponds with what I posted, therefore I'm going to bet it. Or, hey, this guy changed my mind on it, I'll bet against it, or I'll stay away from it, or maybe I'll cut my bet back a little bit. Again, I'm not right all the time. All I do is put in the work and see how it turns out. That's all we can do, folks. And I put the work in on this card, so we have to get after it. We've got our first of 5 main card predictions coming up. Let's check her out. Fight number 1 on the main card is the aforementioned welterweight matchup between CM Punk, 0-1, taking on The Truth, Mike Jackson, also 0-1. Now, as I said, you know, I'm still upset that a pair of 0-1 fighters are on the main card. I do understand the business aspect of it. I do understand the draw that these two offer, but honestly, it's just not where it should be. Now, as I said, Jackson 0-1 as a professional. The fight lasted 45 seconds against Mickey Gall. He was knocked down, and he was submitted. For Punk, his fight against Mickey Gall lasted 2 minutes and 14 seconds. He was taken down, beaten up, and submitted. Not much to go on based on those two fights. Physically, Jackson 1 inch taller. He is the younger man by 7 years, and Punk's been out of action for 20 months. Jackson hasn't fought in 28 months. Now, when you look at Mickey Gall first, it's probably worth analyzing their opponent. He's 4-1 as a pro. He submitted Northcutt He won round 2 against Randy Brown. Sage North he submitted. Won round 2 against Randy Brown. Looked good. I actually picked him to beat Brown. I thought he would on the basis of what he did in round 2. Just ran out of gas in round 3. He's a work in progress, but he is a talented prospect. There's no denying that. So those two guys losing to him, certainly not that big of a knock on either one of them. Now, the first question we have to ask is, how far has CM Punk come? He is a BJJ blue belt. He trains at a Rufus Sport under Duke Rufus. It's a good gym. He trains with good guys. He's had almost 2 years to improve. In his first performance, he very much showed the signs of being an amateur. He stumbled forward kind of sluggishly, went right into a takedown, got pounded on, got choked, and this time around he should know better, I would think. At the same time, he's been fighting in the gym and fighting, preparing and getting ready. It's still, how does he show up under the big lights? Fighting live is not the same thing, not by any stretch of the imagination. Can he keep his composure and not make those types of mistakes? Fighting at home in Chicago, it should give him a huge push. He'll be a crowd favorite. Could it be overwhelming? I don't know. He's fought in front of big crowds before. Obviously, wrestling, not real. Not real at all. But it's one of those things where, how will it impact him? Of the footage I've seen of him, I'm still not overly impressed. He looks, stiff, sluggish with his striking. It just does not look good for a guy who's been doing it for 2+ years now trying to get ready. Now, Jackson, he didn't last as long as Punk did. He was dropped on his feet, despite the fact that he does come from a Muay Thai background. And people felt that his strength in that fight was going to be his striking, and obviously it wasn't. It didn't hold up. And it ultimately led to him getting submitted. Now, the belief is he is going to be vulnerable on the mat. Gall was very solid there and got the fight there and won as a result. The question for us is, can Punk do anything there? We have seen him in video footage looking for takedowns. Again, they didn't look that great. I don't think he can get him on the mat without, some fortunate things going his way. It's also worth noting, Punk is 39 years old. Jackson isn't young, but at 33 he's in a much better physical condition. Punk might not have the MMA miles, but again, wrestling is a demanding form of sports entertainment that can take a lot out of you. And Jackson also has some combat sports experience to back him up. Punk, he's a wrestler. That's all he's got going for him. Punk, in his last fight, he was taken down right away. And we didn't get to see any of his striking. What happens if Jackson, the opposite strike with him, lands a big jab, lands a power strike? As we've seen some of his Muay Thai fights, he's capable. He is capable. How does Punk react? Does he shoot, in a poor manner and put himself in a bad spot? Does he fold up? We don't know. He looked tough in his last fight, but that's not saying much. Ultimately, I think here Punk needs to score a sloppy takedown or get Jackson tired by holding him on the cage, then try to overwhelm him. Maybe try and catch him in a flurry, but again, you're walking into his world with a striking background. I might be overselling Jackson's striking skills a little bit, but I've seen at least he's got some skill there. I don't think Punk's going to be able to do it. I think it's a neat story if he does, and if he wins and the crowd goes nuts, it'll be very interesting. I don't know where they go from here with it. Maybe it's a case of I did it twice. I came back from an embarrassing defeat. Thanks, guys. I've done it. I'm moving on. But my prediction is Mike the Truth Jackson to defeat CM Punk by TKO. Fight number 2 in the main card takes us to the UFC's heavyweight division. It's the 9th-ranked and former UFC heavyweight champion, Andrei the Pitbull Arlovski, 27 wins, 15 losses, and 1 no contest, takes on the fast-rising Australian Thai Bam Bam Tuivasa, undefeated at 9-0. Now, we have a very interesting matchup here, kind of a very good juxtaposition of situations as far as where their careers are concerned. A former world heavyweight champion taking on an interesting but relatively untested prospect. Now, for Andrei, he had won 6 consecutive fights. He's very much up and down. He won 6 consecutive fights. He then lost to Stipe. Stipe went on to win the world title in his next matchup, so it shows you how close Andrei was as far as contending. And Andrei, that loss to Stipe, started a 5-fight losing streak. But during that losing streak, he lost to, of course, the champion, 2 future title challengers, and a couple other decent fighters. But he has since corrected that losing streak and has picked up back-to-back wins, which with me correctly predicting, I think I correctly predicted both those upsets that he had, and I thought he had a fairly good fight against Marcin Tybura as well. Now, for Tuivasa, he beat James McSweeney from Ultimate Fighter fame way back in the day, the Kimbo season, on the regional scene, knocked him, and then he took out Rashad Coulter via flying knee TKO, and then he stopped Cyril Asker, and he's put together a pretty nice little run for a prospect to get himself at least noticed. For Andrei Arlovski, he's 1 inch taller, with a 2-inch reach advantage. Tuivasa is upwards of 25 pounds heavier, and he is the younger man by 14 years. But again, those gaps at the heavier divisions don't necessarily mean quite as much as they do in the younger divisions, but still, it's a big age gap. Now, before we go anointing Tuivasa as the next big thing, and he's an exciting fighter, he's fun to watch, And it's a pretty cool story to see him in there competing. We have to put things in perspective. His 2 UFC wins have come over a pair of opponents with a combined record of 2-5 in the octagon. And both of those wins came over low-level guys, and 4 of their 5 losses came by first-round knockout, with the 5th coming by second-round knockout. So he's beating guys he should beat, but it doesn't mean anything as far as, it doesn't really mean that much in the grand scheme of things. Now, we also need to talk about, this is the first time that Tai has fought outside of Australia. And for Arlovski, he's actually fighting at home in Chicago. I know he's from Belarus originally, but he's got a lot of connections to Chicago, and so he's going to absolutely be the fan favorite and have fan support here. Surrounding Tuivasa, there's a lot of questions. We've seen him untested. He's been untested on the map for the most part. James McSweeney had some success putting him down, and there's been a lot of questions whether he's vulnerable or not if taken down. And he's already said his favorite grappling technique is the get up, because he wants nothing to do with competing on the floor. So that's worth taking note of. And the other big question is his cardio. As a big man who carries a lot of weight, who's pretty much finished every fight in the opening round, and in fights we have seen him be pushed, he will slow down a little bit outside of the UFC, and we wonder what his cardio is going to do if he can't get a seasoned, battle-hardened veteran out of there in the early goings. All of his wins are by knockout, all in the first round. He's aggressive, but again, how does he fare against adversity? How does he fare in rounds 2 and 3? How does that come about? It is worth noting he's 5-2 as a pro boxer, so he does have some striking background, come from a striking background. He's got a big straight right, which he hurt Coulter with. He throws some decent body kicks. He steps in with the right hand, with his right hand up and ready to go, so it's always cocked and ready to unload. He throws a nice uppercut. When he does clinch up, he does an effective job of striking on the break, and I like his low kicks. We saw them worked into his fights as well. And of course, for a big man willing to throw a flying knee, if that works out, that's huge. That's awesome. When he fought Cyril Asker, he was throwing some very hard combinations and hard counter strikes. And every time he pushed forward, he was looking to swarm and overwhelm him. He looked very good in that fight. But again, it's worth noting that Asker, the initial sequence that led to the finish, was a collision of heads. If you go back and watch that fight, those two guys, boom, came together, conked noggins, and then Asker was kind of in la-la land, unable to defend, and Tuivasa not stopped with the official. He went to work. So no ill foul on his. He'll play on his side. It's just he did what he had to do. He threw some nice body shots, big elbows along, and he was fairly accurate with his punches before getting the finish. Now, for Andrei Arlovski, again, he's the type of guy, he seems to need to re-image himself or change up things in order to have success. He went to Jackson's and found success. He's now gone to American Top Team, which has led to another evolution, another improvement. He's changed his style. He's reinvented himself. He's focusing much more on strategy, which is crucial in this fight. Now, as far as what Andrei does well, he's got solid boxing. He's got good power. His leg kicks are fairly sharp. He throws multiple kicks in succession. He throws a nice low calf kick. He'll go to the body as well. He seems to be moving better of late. He's a lighter heavyweight. It's in the 240 range. He's light on his feet. He attacks from different angles. And in some of his fights, we see him throwing around the guard, which is a very effective technique. The other thing I like to see, and I've seen out of him in a couple of fights, especially against Stefan Struve, who's a big, long man, is we saw Arlovski tying up and using the clinch to shut down his opponent's offense. And that could be the key to shutting down Tuivasa and also draining his conditioning. Now, there are issues with the chin of Andrei. We know that. And he has a tendency to freeze up under fire. So if Tuivasa is able to push him and throw some of that big heat, that could be enough to get him out of there. What I do like in this matchup is Andrei Arlovski's wrestling and sambo. He's very good on the ground. He took Stefan Struve down 4 times. It's a good strategy. I expect to see him employ something similar here. Again, Tuivasa has questionable takedown defense and a questionable ground game. His cardio is also an issue, and all of those scenarios together, it could be very draining. When you add in the fact he's fighting away from home for the first time, it's a significant step up in competition. Again, all of that can take away from his performance overall, especially if he can't get that fight done in the early goings. Ultimately, when you look at how this fight's going to play out, I look for Andrei Arlovski to use the clinch and then takedowns from the clinch to put Tuivasa on his back. Again, Tuivasa needs to strike early, begin that early aggression, could open him up to getting taken down, put on his back. Maybe Andrei gets a stoppage in rounds 2 or 3 with exhaustion, but my prediction is Andrei Arlovski, and again, traditionally when Andrei wins fights, he grinds them out. If he can't get a finish early, he grinds them out. So my prediction is Andrei Arlovski to defeat Tai Tuivasa. I'll take him most likely by decision. Fight number 3 in the main card is a very interesting matchup. It's in the UFC Women's Featherweight division as former Bantamweight champion and Featherweight title challenger Holly the Preacher's daughter Holm, 11 wins and 4 losses, takes on the debuting and former Invicta Featherweight champion Megan Anderson with a record of 8 wins and 2 losses. She's fighting out of Australia. Now, this is a very curious fight for me. Anderson has been linked to a title shot before. She was supposed to debut against Cyborg. That didn't happen. She won the Invicta strap. This would have been an easy sell, her coming in as the person who followed Cyborg as the Invicta champion, set up that title fight. We got a new champ, we got a new bout, and then regardless who wins, Holly Holm could fight the winner. and we got 2 interesting fights instead. We're going to have one of them eliminated here from possible contention. Okay, so that's definitely in a very shallow division. I'm not sure about this decision, but hey, it'll be an interesting fight nonetheless. It's worth noting Holly Holm has lost 3 of her last 4 matchups, 3 of which coming by decision, 1 via submission, which cost her title, and she's had 3 title fight defeats as well, which is certainly concerning. Anderson, 4 wins in a row. Not top-level competition. Again, the division's not overly deep. She had a win over Peggy Morgan, an Ultimate Fighter and former UFC competitor who certainly was not UFC level. So not exactly elite-level competition she's been beating. But when you look at her physical gifts and her talent, she's definitely interesting as a fighter. She is 6 feet tall, which will put her 4 inches taller than Holly Holm. She'll have a 4-inch reach advantage, and she is 9 years younger. She has been out of action for 17 months, but she's the type of fighter we've seen some significant improvements one fight to the next in recent action when she's fighting for Invicta, so I expect something similar here. Now, Holly Holm, she wants that rematch with Cyborg. She nearly won that fight. Is there a possibility for a post-title fight letdown? Again, she's 1-1 in scenarios where she's fighting after losing a title. She lost to Shevchenko, but she did beat Betch Koheda after she lost the title fight prior to that. She has 3 losses in title fights against Tate, Jermaine D. Rondami, and Cyborg. Those are the last 3. Her only title fight win, of course, Ronda Rousey. Looking at Megan Anderson first, she's a very big girl. She's long and she is strong and she hits hard. Her striking is improving each time out. And again, that layoff could be very good for her. She throws pretty straight punches. She's got a spearing left jab. One of her fights against Bell, she hurt her with a jab and then throwing some good punch-kick combinations. Sometimes just 2 straight combos, 1 punch, 1 kick, and get out of there. And she throws hard with everything she offers. She has a good series of kicks. She'll go to the head. She'll go to the body. That put Bell down. When she defeated Charmaine Tweet, she overwhelmed her and put her out of there as well, really busted her up, and she just didn't want any more. She will throw knees at range. Again, her height allows her to attack with those. Again, she's also very effective in the clinch, and that she allows her to bring her size to bear on her opponent, which is something she has to look to do against Holly Holm, who's smaller, and who's openly admitted that bantamweight's probably a more appropriate spot for her. Once she clinches along the cage, look for her to land those knees, land some elbows, and try to bust up her opponent. She was, against Tweet, she was getting hit at distance. She was getting tagged. Her nose was getting bloodied up a little bit. So if Holly can do what she does best and keep her on the outside, that is certainly a benefit to her. Now, we did see Megan Anderson. She has gone for takedowns in the past. She was submitted earlier in her Invicta career. Against Tweet, she changed levels for her takedowns. And again, that also tells us she wasn't enjoying the exchanges on the feet. And against a top-level striker like Holly Holm, that could be a concern. At the same time, Holly Holm's not an overly aggressive bruiser. She's more of a technician. And that might allow Megan Anderson to be the bully in this fight. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Holm, she's very good at using her kicking offense. She'll attack her opponents, and she'll also defend their ability to close the gap with that offense. She likes to use her kicks to create distance. She throws a nice oblique kick. Against Tate, it shut down Tate's ability to get on the inside, kept her on the outside. She landed strikes and avoided distance being closed. That will be crucial against Anderson, who's going to want to get in there and really bust her up. Again, a variety of kicking techniques, lead leg kicks, back leg kicks. She'll go to the body. Again, against an orthodox fighter like Anderson, similar to Betch Koheda, she has a lot of back leg power kick opportunities that she can throw. She has several kick-related knockouts throughout her career. And again, when she fought Rousey, and again against Koheda as well, she was counter-striking. She was holding back and letting them come to her. And again, against an aggressive striker like Anderson, that could be her best course of action here. But at the same time, we have seen Holm have issues when her opponent pushes the pace. She's not a high-volume striker. She needs time to set up. So if her opponent uses a combination of strategy and aggression, that can hurt her. Shevchenko is a perfect example of that. While Holly hurt her in the opening round, Shevchenko was able to work at a distance where Holly couldn't touch her. Yeah, she could get on the inside and land. And Jermaine D. Rondami had success countering as well and making Holly Holm pay and landing the more significant strikes, which put Holly at a deficit and made it difficult for her to catch up. How does Anderson look in a debut fight? It's a long layoff she's coming in on, and she's had 6 straight finishes. So in a 3-round fight, that could be an issue against Holly Holm. Again, Holm looked very good against Cyborg, but she's 36 years old. That's starting to get up there. Title fight letdown's also an option, a concern. Again, she's had issues with aggressive opponents. She's facing a very, very big and physical fighter in Megan Anderson. I expect her to use her aggression to simply outpoint her. She's going to fight at close range. She's going to use the clinch. She might even hurt her. And I'm actually going to pick a bit of an odd outcome. Even though Cyborg couldn't get it done, my prediction is Megan Anderson to defeat Holly Holm by TKO. In the co-main event of the evening, it's the first of 2 title fights. This one a welterweight interim title fight as the former lightweight champion, #1 Rafael dos Anjos, 28-9-0, takes on everyone's favorite bad boy, the 4th-ranked Colby Chaos Covington, currently holding a record of 13 wins and just a single defeat. Now, again, I'm not sure why we need an interim title fight. It sounds cheap to me. I'd like to get rid of the fake belts, let the champion hold on to the belt unless he's been gone for, well over, I'd say you start looking for, after a year and a half, you really start looking at crowning a champion. What I'd like to see is the UFC to officially come out and say, we're going to start having #1 contender bouts, and we can make them 5 rounds. This bout, the winner is guaranteed a title shot. And we're making a 5-round fight as a result. They're guaranteed a title shot within 8 months. So in case there's an injury, they have to be ready to fight in 8 months. I don't know, something like that. But again, I'd like to get rid of the fake belts and start making some kind of process and scenario that still makes for 5-round fights, because that is the benefit of having an interim title fight. Good fights get to go 5 rounds. Now, Covington, I like what he's doing. He's an asshole. But he's marketing himself. He's creating a character. He's creating popularity, whether positive or negative. Very similar to what Chael Sonnen did in his UFC run. People want to see him fight either because they like him or because they want to see him get beat up. Either way, they want to watch you, and that's crucial. Now, for Rafael dos Anjos, God, this guy's putting it together again. 3-0 since moving up to 170 pounds. He beat former Strikeforce champion Tarek Saffiedine. He submitted Neil Magny, and he had a 5-round decision over former champion Robbie Lawler in a very, very impressive fight. Now, Covington, he has won 5 consecutive bouts, 3 straight decisions, including smashing Damian Maia. Sorry, he beat Brian Barberena, but he beat Damian Maia in Brazil, and that takes a lot of cojones to go into Brazil and do what he did. He made no fans whatsoever on that night, and that's almost the coming out party of this asshole-type character we're seeing. RDA, again, looking very good at welterweight since moving up, but Covington is the taller man by 2 inches, or by 3 inches, sorry, and he'll have a 2-inch reach advantage, and he's actually 4 years younger than dos Anjos. Now, prior to the Maia fight, the first thing we're going to talk about, Covington had been using his takedowns exclusively to dominate and possibly finish opponents. A lot of people talk about him as a grinder, but he was putting guys away because of his takedowns. When you look back at his record, 8 takedowns versus Dong Young Kim, which is no easy task against a judo player like Kim, 12 against Barberena, 6 against Max Griffin, and, except the Maia victory, he landed 2 or more takedowns in each one of his UFC wins. So very impressive numbers. Now, when you look at Rafael dos Anjos, the guy's a BJJ black belt with a 66% takedown defense. He has been taken down just twice in his last 9 fights, but it is worth noting over his last 6 fights, when those 2 takedowns occurred, he has only had 7 takedowns thrown his way. Covington is going to attempt more takedowns in this fight than RDA has faced in the last 3 years. The Brazilian, though, he has shown he can use his wrestling as well and his jiu-jitsu to win fights. Not with the volume takedowns like Covington offers, but still he's very good on the mat. But when you look at what Covington did against Maia, he shut down all 13 of Maia's takedown attempts. That's impressive. Prior to the Woodley, Colby Covington, Kamaru Usman sequence against Damian Maia, Maia had taken down 12 straight opponents, dating all the way back to his middleweight fight against Chris Weidman. 88% takedown defense for Covington. Dong Young Kim has been the only man to take him down. He took him down twice. So what I'm suggesting here is it's going to be very difficult for both of these men to get them on the ground. Who does that favor? Well, if Covington is forced to strike, he's got to land he threw some good low kicks against Maia that really took Maia out of his comfort zone and hurt him. He's got to do that here. He's got to use a lot of pressure and go forward. Maia started to slow down, and that's when Colby Covington started having success engaging. He pulled Maia into a brawl in that fight. He took him out of his comfort zone. He collapsed his cardio, and he took over. Is that possible against Rafael dos Anjos? Dos Anjos has been in some long, drawn-out brawls. You look back to his fight with Lawler. That was a big, tough fight. You go back to his time at lightweight when he fought Tony Ferguson. That was a demanding, grueling matchup. So he has experience in these types of fights. It's also worth noting when Colby fought Damian Maia, Maia was routinely landing a left hand early in that matchup and hurting him, had him backed up and backtracking. And it was kind of a rough sequence for Colby. Offensively, Colby was overextending when striking. He did get cut in that fight, and he kept touching it. It seemed to bother him early on. And, you wonder, had Maia not got exhausted and got tired, could he have won that matchup? Did he win the first round? Could he have taken that fight over? I don't know. Now, for dos Anjos, when he fought Lawler, he threw some very hard low kicks, which if he's going to take Covington's wrestling out of the equation and make him less effective, that's crucial. He'll also go to the body. He hurt Lawler with the left hand, which is a weapon that sounds like it works against Colby. I think that'll be a highlight of his offense here. And he swarmed Lawler in the cage with an overwhelming combination striking sequence, which to me, I don't think Colby does well with good strikers that pressure him. I've seen that in the past, and if RDA can do that, that could be a key to his success. When they fought in the clinch, Lawler's a bigger man, and RDA held his own. He was separating, landing punches, landing knees and elbows, and turning Lawler off the cage. Lawler had some success holding him there for a bit, but it wasn't the end of the fight. For RDA, he's gone 5 rounds on 3 different occasions. That is crucial in a fight like this. Colby has never gone 5 rounds. And again, the grueling matchups that Lawler and Ferguson have been through. Again, Colby has excellent cardio. There's no denying that. He can go and go and go, and he's a wrestler. But again, when you face a guy who's not breaking, when you're used to fighters breaking in the second half, that is a very interesting scenario. Again, Covington struggled with the striking of Maia. He needed Maia to slow down. I'm not sure how Rafael dos Anjos is going to slow down. Colby needs to find some success with his wrestling here to grind this one out, possibly put him on the cage, really take that striking advantage out of it for dos Anjos. But I think RDA is going to defend the takedowns, land low kicks, land the superior punching combinations, and I think he's ultimately going to outwork and hurt Colby Covington, and my prediction is Rafael dos Anjos to defeat Colby Covington by TKO. Now, moving to the main event where it's all on the line, the UFC's middleweight title as the champion, Robert the Reaper Whittaker, also known affectionately as Bobby Knuckles, fighting out of New Zealand, 20 wins and 4 losses, takes on the #1 ranked fighter in the world in the division, Yoel, Soldier of God, Romero, Cuban-born, 13 wins and 2 losses for Romero. Now, as we all know at this point, this is a rematch from from UFC 213, July 8th. Whittaker won a unanimous decision to capture the title. It was an interim title fight at the time. Romero was supposed to face Whittaker last February. Whittaker pulled out with a very serious staph infection that had him in serious condition. Luke Rockhold stepped in. He fought Romero for an interim title. And then ultimately when this was George St. Pierre, kind of that whole situation, when he pulled out, we then basically set up a whole Whittaker versus Romero match for the title. That's what we're looking at here. Now, you look at the numbers these guys have put together, damn impressive. Whittaker, 8 consecutive wins. He's 7-0 since moving to middleweight. And the guys he's beaten, Yoel Romero, Jacare Souza, Derek Brunson, all solid victories, all big wins. His last loss came in 2014 when he's fighting at welterweight against Stephen Thompson. So, again, he's put together a very impressive streak to get to this point. For Romero, he had won 8 consecutive bouts. He has won 9 of his last 10, and he's beaten guys like, again, Jacare, Chris Weidman, Luke Rocco, Lyoto Machida. These guys have beaten a who's who of each other. Who's who of competition, including Whittaker, though, with the nod over a win over Romero. They do have some common opponents, Derek Brunson, Brad Tavares, and Jacare Souza. Again, it seems like these two have been building towards, facing off, and that's not, you go back to some of the fights we've had in the middleweight division, Silva versus Weidman, Silva versus Rockhold, this is where we're at now. This has been a very strong division for marquee title fights, I think. Physically, both guys 6 feet tall, same 73-inch reach. Whittaker, though, the younger man by 13 years. Now, looking at the stats from the first fight, Whittaker outlanded Romero 74-48 in significant strikes. Romero landed more significant strikes in round 1, but Whittaker took over that scenario. After that, Romero landed more overall strikes in round 2, I believe it was, but Whittaker landed the better strikes. In the final round, Whittaker 31 significant strikes, 18 for Romero. So again, the dialogue I'm looking at there is the fact that Whittaker was still pushing, Romero was slowing down. Romero 4 for 18 on his takedown attempts, 3 for 10 in rounds 1 and 2, 1 for 8 in rounds 3, 4, and 5. So over less rounds, he attempted more takedowns and landed more early, as in more rounds later on, he landed more and he landed less and he attempted less. So he was clearly getting tired. But again, you don't need to look at the stats for that. You just need to look at the fight to see what was happening there. Now, Whittaker also suffered an injury in the first round that seemed to be bothering his leg. He kept pushing, didn't slow down, disguised it well, and won the fight as a result of his perseverance. Now, Robert Whittaker's hands look very fast, and they come with power. He was really keen on a front kick to the body. It was allowing him to cover distance exceptionally well, do damage, possibly take away the cardio of Romero, but it was also keeping Yoel on the outside. Yoel's famously known for covering distance, being so explosive and be able to generate power with very little movement, and Whittaker was kind of taking that out of the equation. Romero came out kicking early and was having a lot of success, but Whittaker was closing and countering, throwing a solid jab, and the first round ultimately was very close with both guys having their moments. I didn't like the way Romero was throwing a lot of jumping techniques, and they can be exhausting. When you throw a kick-heavy offense or an explosive offense that involves a lot of movement and expectation, it can be very tired, and I think that was costing him. The first double leg takedown, he dumped Whittaker down, but Whittaker got up very quickly. There was a lot of energy expended by Romero, and for very little gain. We saw very good balance by Whittaker, and Romero was throwing everything at him, flying knee attempts into takedown attempts, and Whittaker just kept shoving him off. His whizzer was working very well, and just overall, even for a guy who's injured, he was having a lot of success. We did see Romero, I think, in round 2 land a big takedown, hold top position for the biggest point of the fight. But Whittaker eventually got up, and again, energy expenditure for Romero with minimal reward. The key to that fight, and we've seen a lot from Romero, his output was dropping as the fight going. He was dancing but not throwing. He was getting backed up by pressure. Again, he started to fight more defensive, being pushed back, not moving forward. He was struggling to land his takedowns. Again, lots of energy being expended, and just not an ideal performance for a guy not known for having great cardio. Whittaker was hurting him later in the fight. Again, not overcommitting, staying smart, not opening himself up, just fighting effectively. We did see that front kick to the body, again, taking away Romero's cardio, keeping him back and throwing off his timing as well. Now, the big thing is coming out of this fight, for the winner, why change your performance? You won the fight, why do anything different? For the loser, you have to adapt. Will Romero, he's kind of a veteran fighter, he's an older fighter, will he adapt and make changes? One change I would suggest, less flashy techniques, less jumping attempts, maybe don't shoot for takedowns right away. Try and get a round or two ahead. If you're striking, you think your striking is better, don't go for takedowns early on. I don't know, it seemed to tax him. Whittaker coming off the longer layoff, also a big concern. Romero looked good against Luke Rockhold, but that fight followed a very similar pattern to what we've seen before. Overall, the significant strikes ended 45-45. Romero still relies on big moments. He has close fights and then big moments. For example, when you look at the Machida fight, it was a very close fight, and then boom, he finished him. Chris Weidman, Romero probably lost the opening round, boom, he finished him. Jacare, Romero won the early stages of that fight, hurt him, couldn't finish him, and then boom, Jacare climbed back in the fight, and a lot of people felt he won that matchup because the big moment didn't happen, or it wasn't significant as it needed to be. Romero needs finishes and big moments to win fights if he can't, and that's crucial to his performance. Whittaker, again, I think he avoids those big moments. He does an excellent job of being hard to hit, deceptive, and changing up his rhythm, and that keeps Romero from having those big opportunities to change the complexion of the fight. I expect to see him hold his own early and then pull away as the fight advances, very similar to the last matchup. Normally, I would consider a finish in a rematch that comes off a 5-round war, but I think these two match up very well. I expect to see Romero go back into that defensive stance after he starts to tire, and Whittaker, again, he remains smart, doesn't expose himself, picks away at him, and cruises to a victory. It'll be a good fight, but my prediction is Robert Whittaker to defeat Yoel Romero by decision. So those are my 5 main card predictions for UFC 225. All of my preliminary picks will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. So are my bet packs. We're coming off a profitable night. It's been a profitable year so far, so please check them out. I do things different than everybody else. A lot of people don't like it. If you don't like it, that's fine. If you do, keep rolling with me. Again, you can follow me on Twitter at KO_predictions. We are also on Facebook. We are also on YouTube. I'd love to hit the 2,000 subscriber limit or number on YouTube. Again, people don't go to my YouTube channel as much as they used to because they come directly to my website. Either way, it's lots of fun. It looks like a fucking fantastic card. When you have Anthony Smith versus Rashad Evans on the Facebook prelims, it's going to be fantastic. Sergio Pettis versus Joseph Benavidez on the Facebook prelims. Wow, can't ask for more. Looking forward to it. Take care, guys, and I'll talk to you very soon. I think we get a week off after this one, so I get a little bit of a break. Talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye. Hi.